can't hear it.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, Angelica.
Hello.
So thank you for joining me today. Angelica is my friend and colleague, and today she's going to talk about depression, particularly postpartum. And I'm Rachel. I'm your new mom coach and lactation consultant. And this is a really, really important topic. And Angelica had some experience herself, so she's going to enlighten me and others, because it is a place where moms can spiral into. So what I know from talking to many, many women in the postpartum period is that there's a feeling of overwhelm, anxiety, there's guilt, there's shame. You feel defeated if breastfeeding doesn't go well, if you're not doing the best to give to your baby. But what happens is if that's untreated, then it can spiral down. And I think that that's what happened into Angelica, and she's going to talk about her experience. So I'm really, really grateful that you're willing to do this with me.
Of course. I think also we should mention that I have a background in clinical psychology and was working as a counselor when this happened to me. And I didn't realize that it was postpartum depression, even though I have, a clinical psychology degree.
Interesting. Yes. And a lot of times when providers or doctors have their own babies, it doesn't matter that they have all that experience and that degrees and all of that, because they can't help themselves. And sometimes and what we're going to really emphasize today is support and the importance of having a confidant is the word you used.
Yeah, confidant.
Love that. And somebody who you can trust, because sometimes you can't see, even if you're a PhD level, you can't see what's going on inside your own world. So thank you for that. And yes, Angelica does great work with, you want to say what you do?
Sure. I help people. Well, I spent 7 years helping people out of toxic relationships and researching personality disorders. And now I'm leaning more into healthy relationships and people who have, a basically healthy marriage or relationship, but they have some communication issues that they need to improve.
I love Angelica and our relationship because we've helped each other over the years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How old is Isabel now?
She's 6.
And she's so cute.
Thanks. Yes. And I mean, I breastfed Isabel for 4.5 years.
Yeah. I had one of those babies as well and it's great because in the world, actually, this is an amazing statistic. The length of weaning in the whole world is actually 4 years old.
I believe it.
That somebody has to be on the other spectrum. And Benjamin was, I think he had milk at my breast until 6. And today he's 6'2", and he's got, he's an amazing person. He just came back for my birthday to cook for 45 of my friends.
Oh my God, so sweet. So sweet.
So it's it's not, and there's no shame in that. And we have to start, that's a whole other topic we can talk about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could talk forever about it.
Yeah. So you had some questions on weaning, and I helped you came to me with that. And
yeah, it came to a point with Isabel where I was just done being touched. She would, and I'm sure many people can relate to this who breastfeed, she would fiddle with one of my breasts while she was nursing on the other side, or she would just want to touch my breasts. And I got to the point where I was just done being touched, and it had been almost 5 years, and I decided I wanted to wean, but trying to wean a preschooler is a lot different from trying to wean a baby. They have a lot to say about it. So, I knew I could talk to you about how do I do this because it was so challenging.
Yeah.
And then, of course, dealing with mood fluctuations as well from starting to wean. So thank you for all that help.
Definitely got you through it, and she is thriving, and your breastfeeding journey is very inspirational, I have to say. And what's interesting is I didn't know you had postpartum depression until last week.
I know.
Because what you strike me as someone who is so confident, and this might be my limitation of, well, if you're depressed then you can't have this, but that's not true. You you were a confident mom, you breastfed for years, and you had postpartum depression.
Yeah.
That
And
too.
honestly, I had postpartum anxiety too, and that lasted for years. The depression thankfully resolved maybe in, I don't know, a few months, but the
Yeah.
anxiety lasted for years. And even though I have a clinical psychology degree, I didn't know that it wasn't normal, because everyone says, oh, like, of course you worry about your kids.
Right.
So, but they didn't realize the extent of the worry.
So talk to us about the physiology of the extent of the anxiety, because we know that anxiety lives in the body, and it's like a worry, right? Like, oh, should I worry about this? Should I worry about that? And we know that worrying is just asking for what you don't want. So talk to me about anxiety and how it was showing up in your body, and how that you weren't aware that that was abnormal, right? Because there's the anxiety that's like, oh, it just eats at you every day. But talk to us about how it really was something that was even deeper, that limited you.
So interestingly, it wasn't anxiety, because I've had other types of anxiety in my life because I was in a toxic relationship. So that type of anxiety was very much in my body. Like, my heart would pound. I was walking on eggshells. I didn't know what to expect. So I had a lot of that physiologically induced anxiety, where my heart was pounding and I felt like heaviness in my chest. But the anxiety related to having my baby, or being a new mom, was more in my thoughts. It was not letting my daughter sleep in a crib. I held her all night because I was so afraid that she was going to stop breathing. It was just panic. Like, the very few times that she did sleep in a bassinet, I would wake up like, and I'd like shake her, like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
It was really traumatic, and it was in my head mostly. I think a lot of women experience just major overthinking, being in your head a lot, like worrying about getting into the car. Is something bad going to happen to me or my baby? And then that goes into the depression, which is, like, what would happen if I died? And who would be there for my baby? And then you go down this like rabbit hole of all, bad thoughts, thoughts, like that scary thoughts.
Right. Your thoughts were out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And talk about the difference between just kind of like the normal, are you okay, checking on them and they're breathing, versus what you had.
I mean, as I said, I would wake up in a panic and shake, literally like shake Isabel, like not like shaken baby, but I'd be like, "Isabel, are you okay? Like, are you breathing?" It was, and this went on for years.
Years.
This went on for years.
Wow, really?
Isabel was a toddler, and I would wake up and think she wasn't breathing.
Yeah.
And I would give her a little shake, like, "Are you okay? Are you alive?" And she'd just be in a deep sleep.
There's something about it being the common, new parent or the baby, because is there anything obstructing their breathing? But to have that happen for years and years, that is maybe common but not normal for a new mom to have that much anxiety. Okay.
Yeah, and I have to mention, so I had a baby first, and my sister did a couple years later, and my sister ended up getting postpartum depression. And I mean, there are many reasons people get postpartum depression and anxiety. It could be genetics, it could be hormonal, it could be environmental, but my sister ended up getting it. She was in a supportive relationship. She had a really supportive husband, but she still had postpartum anxiety. And she would tell me that she would pack her car, like if she was going on a road trip or something, based on like, well, if I stop short and this flies, like, what's going to hit my baby's head first? And, a lot of people don't think like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was getting worse and worse for my sister. And she finally told me about it. And I said, that's postpartum anxiety. you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
not normal because it's obsessing about it.
And it's not manageable on a day-to-day, right? Because you tell me how you felt about doing your daily tasks. One thing that stood out to me when you told me this last week or so was that you sat on your couch and you really couldn't do anything. So talk to us about what it costs you to have this in terms of your life, doing activities and things like that.
Yeah. So every day I would just get up with Isabel and I would go sit on the couch and I just would hold her the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would put her down and let her have like tummy time. But, basically just sit there on the couch. I did nothing else. I couldn't really get tasks done. I barely cleaned. I had a house cleaner at that time, but just didn't do much of anything except hold Isabel. And, I actually, even though I had a master's degree and I could have like a good job, I ended up nannying because I didn't want to leave Isabel, which I think is normal for many women. They don't want to leave their kid. But I just had this intense anxiety that if she wasn't under my watch, that something bad was going to happen to her.
I want to differentiate between that being very, very healthy in the first few weeks because you want to stay in bed with your baby, get to know your baby, learn about breastfeeding, and give yourself the time it needs versus 6 months later, a year later. So could you talk to us a little bit about your timeline and when you really knew you needed to get help?
So I would say I knew I needed help early on. It must have been month 2 or 3. It was actually month 2. She was only 2 months old and I wasn't able to smile at her. That's how I knew something was off. I wanted a baby my entire life. Like from the time I was a child, I was playing mama and baby. I was a mother's helper. I was a babysitter. I was a nanny. So I had been wanting a child my whole life, but then I have this child when I'm 2 months postpartum and I can't even smile at her. And that's how I knew something was not right because the first month, I was in complete awe of her, so happy. And then all of a sudden I can't smile at her. So, what helped the depression, at least, because the anxiety, as I said, went on for many years, was so I was working with a lactation consultant, and it was interesting because I had an OBGYN who I told I was having these feelings, and she immediately, like without even seeing me, prescribed Zoloft. And she didn't get like my history or anything about how sensitive I am to medication. So I was sleeping for like 3 days. I could not even get out of bed. And I could barely take care of Isabel besides nurse her. And, I came off of that. I told them that it wasn't a good fit, but it also made me suicidal. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I wanted to get off of that right away. And I got off, and then I reached out to somebody at the hospital that I was living near at the time.
Whoa, can you back up?
Yeah.
That word, it's so massive. Tell us, tell us like what made you say that like, what was it that you were thinking? What were you going through at that point?
It's a good question. So long ago at this point. I think just like, I can't do this. Like, how am I ever going to take care of my house? How am I going to get out of the house with Isabel? Like, I can't just sit here with Isabel 24/7. Just feeling hopeless, really. Feeling incapable. that I was ever going to be able to function normally again.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't like, I want to kill myself. It was more like, how am I going to live like this? Can I really do this?
So do you think that it was the medication that caused you to have suicidal thoughts, or was it the medication that you took wasn't working and you kept thinking, well, what is going to help me to get out of this ability to not function?
I think that's a really good question. So I think when I first developed the depression, I wasn't on any meds. It was just a blank feeling.
Yeah.
Just completely like I called it cloudy head. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was just in the clouds. My head was somewhere else and my body was just sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went on the Zoloft, I had more of like the feelings of like, how am I ever going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to remember, honestly. Like, I just know that I would think, like, what if I die? And
Yeah.
then, like, what's going to happen to Isabel? Because I didn't have a partner
Mm-hmm.
at the time. You know, her dad was somewhat in her life, but it was toxic. So, and he didn't have any custody of her. So it was just like constantly wondering, well, what would happen to her? And then, you know, it pains me to even say this, but then I would think, okay, well, if I'm not going to make it, like Isabel, like what's going to happen to her? Like, who's going to take care of her? So like, I would think to myself, well, okay, if I go, then like, I hope Isabel comes with me because surely she can't live without her mother.
Wow.
Yeah. So no plans of taking my life, but just like in my head, constantly thinking, okay, if I die in my sleep, I hope Isabel dies in her sleep so that she's not an orphan, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking us to the depths of that experience, because it can be a reality for someone watching right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was very isolating. Like I felt like I couldn't tell anyone because not many people talk about this. And, you know, people would automatically think, you know, oh, like she's crazy, basically. She's mentally ill. And yes, I was technically having a mental illness because postpartum depression is a mental illness. But there was a stigma behind what I was feeling and thinking. But what really helped me is I reached out to this support group at the hospital, and they don't have it anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a lactation consultant who was running a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into the group, and I all of a sudden had all these other women who were in a safe space that were
Mm-hmm.
also feeling what I was feeling, but I didn't know that going into it. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them weren't feeling it, but others were.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones who weren't feeling it were like, wow, like, how can I support you? And then most of all, the lactation consultant took me under her wing, and she was like, we've got this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here for you. And when all the other practitioners seemed to be failing me in many ways, she was like, I've got you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt so supported.
Mm-hmm.
And she understood what I was going through. So many people, as I mentioned to you, told me, like, stop breastfeeding. You're depressed because you're breastfeeding, which is like total bullshit. Like, pediatricians don't have the knowledge that the lactation consultant does regarding breastfeeding and like the hormonal changes. So even the pediatrician was telling me, and the OBGYN, to stop breastfeeding, but I was adamant that I was going to breastfeed.
Mm-hmm.
And this lactation consultant just took me under her wing and told me, like, it's all going to be okay. Here's what you need to do. She gave me a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't need the meds. You know, I got off the Zoloft. I didn't need any type of intervention beyond just having the lactation consultant guide me.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And that support that being that knowing that you're not the only one, knowing that you can talk about it freely, knowing that there are other people going through that experience with you. It's really, really important, right?
Yeah.
And yet the culture talks about the postpartum as if it is like a mental illness. And so if you're feeling that kind of way of having these thoughts and things like that, there's a stigma of like, well, I don't want to have the postpartum. But as the like ADHD, there's a lot of, they're called spectrum, right? And so we have that as well. For women postpartum, it's like you can have that feeling of anxiety or overwhelm, right? And then you can also have feelings of suicide, or what if happens if I'm not here, and not being able to move out of your bed. So there's a spectrum, and it's all okay. It's welcomed because it's something that can be resolved.
Right.
And in your case, you had somebody was like, I got you. And that was so important for you to have that trust, right? Like,
yeah. And it wasn't just during that initial period of Isabel being an infant. I was in contact with her for several years. Whenever something came up, I would just call her and she would say, okay, like, let's get you in for a session, or like, how can I support you?
Nice. Yeah. So you built a relationship with her over several months, or if not years.
Yeah.
To have someone to reach out to when things happen. And if you're sensitive like that to drugs or to experiences or overwhelm or anxiety, that can take that's who you are, in certain times with like a challenge has come up, having that person in your back pocket, let's say, to call is really, really important for someone like you. And that really helped you get through.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really what got me through. I mean, that's like what you do with your clients. That's what I do with my clients. Like, we are the expert mentor there for these people, like for you to be there with the moms that are like, I've got you, and there for them 100%.
For sure. Yeah. I have to share, like yesterday I was on a coaching call with my clients, and I did a training on anxiety, because I just know that even though, like, I was like you, I had a relationship where if he came home, I didn't know what to expect. Is he going to be in a good mood, or is he going to tell me how much I didn't do well at this, or dinner's not ready? And I was anxious every single time he came home. But now looking back, having 3 children, that also was a little bit anxious. But I realized that, being in that state of anxiety can happen so often as a mom, right? Like, are they okay? Are they fed? I mean, a lot of moms have like this worry that their baby's not getting enough, but that continues on for years and years. And so having that, like, are they being fed? Like, did I send them enough, food? Are we going on a car ride? Are they going to have snacks? I mean, it's just constant.
Yeah.
It's constant. Are they going to be, at me? So, I was doing a training on anxiety because it is something that can come up over and over. And so having that support, that guide, that mentor is what I believe is really important for my clients. And you believe, it was helpful for you in your experience. But I just want to charge my computer.
I know, mine's about to die. Also.
No, this has been very, very insightful. And I'm going to post this around too and share it. Did it? Yes. Okay. But what I think is very, very interesting is that these things are preventable, right? And the more we get it earlier, the less it can spiral down. So you said that by 2 months, you were still like, I need help. If we can support women the first day and the first weeks and the first months, it is really important because it can be manageable. First it's like, well, I have anxiety, right? And you're managing it. But then it can go into postpartum blues. It can go into making machines that we are. It can say, I'm not a good mom. I'm a failure. I can't do this. This is not for me. You said that on this interview too.
Yeah.
And then what happens is your physiology shifts. And that's when you start sinking into that depression state.
Right.
Because you just don't feel like you can take action and stand up to the challenges and do the things. So some women do the medications, But then we all know Zoloft can rob the body of all the vitamins and minerals. And then what happens is you're left not with enough food for the baby.
Right.
You really need to start turning around your physiology in that way, like getting more nutrients and minerals for your body for the baby. And then
then you're also going to be dependent on Zoloft.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, then it's hard to come off of the Zoloft.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't have that experience because it didn't agree with me from the beginning, but many people get so used to being on the Zoloft, and then, it has side effects. So it like reduces your libido, and it can cause, like I said, suicidal thoughts. Like it can have other effects. So,
Wow. And then it also has effects that we may not see right away, but I mean, I know from my work that we have to replenish a lot of things that are robbed from that medication so that you can get out of that and feel healthy and energized through things that you put in your body and things that you do for yourself every day that can help release that anxiety. And that's the training that I did with my clients yesterday, which is great, because that's the work that I do. It's like, let's take the steps necessary, easy, simple steps that maybe not easy, but simple, that you can do to release that in your body when you're feeling it in the moment. Because there are so many things like it's a body awareness that we work with, right? And if you had that, you don't go into that thought process that you did.
You still see me or no?
No.
My audio or my video just turned off. I don't know.
Well, we've been talking for about 30 minutes, and I feel that we have really tapped into some really important topics today. And I want to thank you so much for your sharing. And so the bottom line is, number one, it is real. It's not, it can be a stigma in the society, but if you have it, you're not alone. You can get help. There are people like myself, consultant, Okay, hi. Sorry about that glitch. Okay, so we posted a link. You can watch my webinar and you can learn a little bit about me and how you can help yourself feel better and sleep better and have a baby who thrives. And that's one thing. And I also want to post here, again, this is a place where you can go to find a lactation consultant in your area. And I'm going to post the link. And that is zipmilk.org. And so you just put in your zip code, and then you can find help in your area. Okay. It's a great presentation today. I like talking with my friend Angelica, and I am here for you, and I've got you, and we'll see you next week.